It's so great that you're here. It doesn't matter if you know me well or if you're just getting to know me. Grab a cup of coffee or something else that you like to drink, and let's hang out for a little while. Today's topic is going to be anxiety. In the very first episode, I briefly mentioned that I deal with anxiety, and that's something I'd like to dive deeper into today. There's different parts of this episode where I want to paint a picture or explain a story from the Bible where we can see what happens when worry comes into our lives, when fear comes in, and how we need to focus on something else when that happens. I also want to tell you a little bit about what it looks like when I deal with anxiety, because let's be honest, a lot of us deal with worry, we deal with fear. No matter where you live, what your job is, what your family situation is, either you or one of your loved ones deals with worry on a regular basis. And I can only speak from my own experience, but I'd like to tell you what it looks like for me and also how I've learned to deal with it and to fight against it, to maybe give you an idea for your own life. But I want the focus of this episode also to be the goal. And the goal is to receive the peace that Jesus promises us. In Isaiah 26:2, it says, "You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you." The "you" that is being referenced in this Bible verse means God. So if we reread it again like that, God will keep in perfect peace all who trust in God, all whose thoughts are fixed on God. And that's kind of the focus or the goal or where I'm working towards in this episode, is that if we redirect our focus away from our worries, away from our fear, and towards God and how He sees us and how He has promises for us, that's where we will find peace. So I also want to tell you that most of what I share on here isn't meant for me to be preaching at you or teaching you something that I've already mastered, because I already admitted it myself. I deal with worry, I deal with fear, I deal with anxiety. And honestly, my husband tells me this too. He tells me that, Liv, you should listen to yourself more often. It's easy to speak hope when you're having a good day. It's easy to say life is great when things are going well. It's harder to do so when things are hard. So from where I am right now, I want to tell you about what I do when it gets hard for me. Not because I'm better or I'm smarter, but just because I want to help and encourage you today. So, before I get to my story, I'd like to look at the Bible, because it's a foundation of truth that I want to build on, that I want to build this podcast on and my life on. So, if you have a Bible and you want to read it, the story I'm talking about is from Matthew 14 today. And if you don't have a Bible, no problem. Let me paint the picture for you. So Jesus' disciples are his friends, the people that were learning from him. And there was 12 of them. They're in this boat that Jesus put them on. He said, hey, go across the lake. I'll be there in a little bit. But they're out on this boat and a storm comes up. And I don't know about you, but even I get worried if I'm on a boat and there's a storm. But they're out on this boat and they start to get afraid. Well, Jesus, from where he was sitting and praying, he sees the struggle that they're in and decides to come meet him right there. So he walks out on the water to get to them. Well, when they see someone coming at them on the water, obviously that's kind of a weird sighting. We don't see that on a normal day. And they get even more afraid. And he immediately says, hey, don't be afraid. Take courage. I am here. He sees their worry, he sees their fear, and he addresses it. Well, Peter, one of the disciples, decides to be super courageous and says, "Hey, Jesus, can I walk on the water with you?" And he said, "Yes, come." So Peter went over the side of the boat and walks out on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. So it doesn't tell us how far he walked, but it does say he walked on water. And he starts walking towards Jesus, and all of a sudden he realizes what's going on, and he realizes the situation he's in. He's on water, and the wind's howling around him, and there's waves and everything, and fear creeps in, and he starts to sink. Then comes a thing that I love. He says, "Save me, Lord." And Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. He didn't wait until he sunk even further. He immediately grabbed his hand and said, "You have so little faith. Why do you doubt me?" Jesus was not making fun of Peter in that moment, but he was stating the facts of, in that moment, Peter had little faith. He saw the wind and the waves, and he was convinced that it was dangerous, even though Jesus said it was safe to come. Jesus also shows us here that he cares. He cared about the disciples and the fear that they had on the boat when they were alone and came to them. He cared about Peter, who was sinking, and he immediately grabs his hand. And God cares too. He wants a relationship with you and with me. But we're imperfect people. Our focus shifts, we get distracted, we make mistakes, and a perfect God requires perfection around him. That's why he sent Jesus. And that's why Jesus cares so much. He wants that relationship with us, and that's why he died to cover up our mistakes. He gives us the grace that we can have a relationship with God right now and in heaven. So Jesus cared about Peter, and Jesus cares about you and me. So what it looks like in my life when I'm like Peter, because I often feel like Peter. On a good day, or when I'm well rested and things are going well, I sometimes feel courageous like Peter. I'm a mom of 2 little boys, and on good days, I like to do special things. I like to go out and do things with my boys. I like to go to the zoo, or I like to go to the city nearby. And there are moments with 2 little boys where it's hard. One's tired, the other one is complaining, or I get overwhelmed by something, the bus is late, or something's going on, and I think, why didn't I just stay at home? That's where I feel like Peter, where my focus shifts. But it's not just things like that. No, I deal with anxiety where my thoughts overwhelm me, where it feels like there's a storm in my head, where I have so many doubts floating around. It almost feels like a tornado or a hurricane. And when that happens, a shift inside of me happens too. All of a sudden, hopelessness appears. I can get to a point where if everything's too much for me, I feel like nothing matters, and I don't care anymore. I feel like it doesn't matter what I try to do, it's not going to be good enough. It doesn't matter if I put effort into something, it's not going to be good enough. It doesn't matter if I cook a healthy meal, because who cares anyways? And I also end up kind of in this fight or flight mode. One thing that I would want to do is go hide in my bedroom, lock the door, hide under my blanket, and just hide. It, where hopelessness also is connected to that, where I'm like, it doesn't matter anyways, I might as well go hide in my bed. But at the same time, I feel like fighting everything, because I feel like I don't want this doubt in my head. This isn't right. I don't want to feel like the world is against me. And I feel like, let's just stop everything, start everything new, just burn it down and start over, because right now is just crap. That's what it looks like for me. And It might sound pretty extreme to you, but sometimes it is extreme in my head. And I've had to learn to deal with it. Sometimes I can fix the problem, but sometimes it's also just knowing the storm will pass. I read a great book from a pastor called Sean Johnson called Attacking Anxiety. And if you like to read, this is a book I'd really recommend for you if you deal with anxiety, or for you to read if you know someone who does deal with anxiety so you can help them out. But, anyways, I've had to learn that one, this too shall pass. It won't stay crazy in my head forever. I'm not crazy just because I feel like it. And I'm not alone. What helps too is to focus on something else. Like Peter said, "Save me, Lord." He was looking to have that change in his focus, in his perspective, looking to Jesus again. And when things get crazy in my head and I feel like it's a mess, sometimes I actually start to clean up things around me. I'll start deep cleaning my kitchen or reorganizing something, trying to bring order into something because I feel like I lost the order in my head. And what I also need to do is focus on truth, because there are truths that are still consistent and still true, even if I don't feel it in that moment. So, the first thing that I want to share with you or suggest is remember what God has already brought you through. Take a moment and think back. When did I feel like this last time? And remember, God brought you through that. In Joshua 4, it talks about God's people, the people of Israel, and how they put up rocks when something big happened. When there was a miracle, so that when they walked by it again, or the next generation walked by it, they would see those rocks and remember what God has done. Maybe you have a special date or something in your life where God did something big. For me this summer, it was the day that I came to Switzerland. 20 years ago, my family moved to Switzerland. And if you would have asked 7-year-old Liv then, I would have told you in a couple of years, I'm going to move back to Colorado. But 20 years later, I'm still here. And I have an amazing husband and wonderful boys. And I'm thankful that God brought me here. So I celebrated that day. And maybe you need to write that down somewhere in your calendar, just like a birthday or something, and celebrate that. Also, I want you to remember that you have a choice. You are not a victim of your thoughts, just like I'm not a victim of my thoughts. And God has given me and you weapons that we can fight against it. And those weapons are His promises in the Bible, that He means well, that He has a good plan for us, that all things work together for good for those who love Him. Just like in the verse from Isaiah at the beginning, you will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you. Trusting in God can bring that perfect peace. But it also says, all whose thoughts are fixed on you, God. Meaning we need to make that choice to redirect our thoughts and focus on the truths. Another key thing is remember it's okay to stumble, but get back up. Peter sunk too, and Jesus grabbed him by the hand and pulled him up. Jesus did not make fun of him, just like Jesus didn't make fun of a different disciple, Thomas. After Jesus died on the cross and he rose again, he appeared to the disciples. But for some reason, Thomas wasn't there that first time. And when the other disciples told him, hey, we saw Jesus, he's alive, Thomas didn't believe it. And Jesus didn't make fun of Thomas and be like, well, why didn't you believe it? I told you I was going to raise from the dead. The others told you they saw me. No, he was gracious with Thomas as well and appeared to him and say, hey, look, here are the marks from the nails. Here is where the sword was stuck into my side. And he let Thomas believe in Jesus at that point where he was, and Thomas needed to see it So remember, it's okay to stumble. We're not perfect. I deal with anxiety. I have anxiety attacks. I start cleaning my house and I freak out and think everything's crap and nothing matters. That's the order I wanted to say that in. Sorry. But we have to refocus and we have to get back up. And the last point is remember to listen. Listen to what God says about you, that you are loved, that He wants a relationship with you, that you are beautifully made, and that He has a plan for you. Also, listen to others that you trust. Just like my husband reminds me, listen to yourself. Listen to what you've said. Look at what you wrote down. He can speak truth into my life, just like close friends that I sometimes text and say, hey, I'm having a bad day. Please pray for me. You don't need to listen to everybody, but pick a couple people that you trust and let them speak life into your life. And just remember, it will pass. You're not crazy. And if you fix your thoughts on Jesus, He'll give you that perfect peace that you want, because when you're dealing with worry and fear, peace is what you're longing for. So, hey, I hope that some of this could help you out. I hope that you can get back up when you stumble, that you can refocus your thoughts on the big picture, that God has a good plan for you, and that you can start fighting your anxiety and your worry and your fears in a wise way. So thanks for hanging out with me now. I hope to hang out with you again soon, and I hope you have a great day.